Throughout the history of religious architecture, many great buildings have been constructed that have both improved and challenged the styles they have been a part of. While there are definitely similarities between various cathedrals and mosques between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, religious architecture has changed a great deal during this developmental time. From Gothic to the rebirth of Roman, and from Byzantine styles and the Ottoman Empire, religious architecture has definitely come a long way from the days of old.
Filippo Brunelleschi was perhaps one of the best engineers and architects of the Renaissance. One major change that happened in the Renaissance was the introduction of Roman styles of architecture. Brunelleschi, in the 15th century, took a trip to Rome to examine the ruins and bring back the knowledge to Florence on how the ancients built their great giant arches, aqueducts, and amphitheaters to use in his works. Brunelleschi's most amazing work was the construction of the dome on the top of the Florence Cathedral. Architects throughout the city could not figure out how to create a 140-foot wide dome that could not stand on its own without structural support. He came up with the idea to put 8 major ribs at the points of the octagon and 16 minor ribs, 2 in the space between every 2 major ribs, all tied together by lateral bands to support itself from the inside. Brunelleschi also used his knowledge on Roman architecture to build the Church of San Lorenzo, with columns supporting round arches such as the Romans had used, instead of the now despised Gothic pointed arches. Brunelleschi, being considered a genius, completely revolutionized the use of Roman-style architecture and in religious architecture.
Gothic architecture is most notably associated with medieval times, as the majority of cathedrals built in the 12th through 14th century were constructed in this style. Gothic style of architecture is not really anything too complicated and does just a few different things to make the style so recognizable and effective in the cathedrals it was utilized in. Gothic cathedrals utilize 3 already existing inventions for the most part to separate them from the rest. These technologies were the pointed arch, the flying buttress, and the ribbed vault. The pointed arch is definitely the most recognizable feature of Gothic cathedrals, and varied slightly from country to country with various arches, such as the lancet arch, equilateral arch, flamboyant arch, and depressed arch. However, prior to the usage in Gothic architecture, the pointed arch was actually used in Middle Eastern architecture, dating back hundreds of years before. The pointed arch was used to distribute weight onto columns at a sharp angle. Using this feature, Gothic cathedrals were able to emphasize height and verticality. Like many other features, the pointed arch was used decoratively and architecturally. Another iconic feature is the ribbed vaulting, which was the support system for the roof of the ceiling of the cathedral. Using the pointed arches and ribbed vaulting together, cathedral walls were able to be built higher and thinner, further distinguishing them from the bulky Romanesque style. Flying buttresses were the last architectural feature that distinguished Gothic cathedrals, that when used in combination with the ribbed vaulting and pointed arches, created a truly Gothic cathedral. The buttress was composed of 2 parts, the buttress, which was made of masonry blocks, and the flyer, which was an arch spanning from the buttress to the exterior wall. The flying buttress transferred the force of the vaulted ceiling and the wind across the flyer, and then all the way to from the buttress to the ground. As to be expected, the decorations of medieval Gothic cathedrals were to convey a Christian message about God. Stained glass windows are most closely associated with Gothic cathedrals and were used to convey biblical stories to the visitors of the church. These windows and other various sculptures and decorations became known as the poor man's Bible, as most average people in the Middle Ages could not read but look at the art and convey biblical stories.
The Sulaiman Mosque is the largest mosque in Turkey. Located in Istanbul, this mosque is more than an architectural beauty, but it's also a magnificent representation of Islamic religion. This mosque also contains more than it seems. It houses 4 schools, a full library, a bathing room, and a hospital. Built in 1550 on the order of the 10th Ottoman Sultan and the longest reigning Sultan, Suleiman, using common mosque practices in the designs of this building, Mimar Sinan created one of the most beautiful mosques of all time. These common structures found in mosques, being the dome, minarets, prayers, niches, and bar, are important in the practice of the Islamic religion. The dome is often a focal point in the mosque because it represents power or a focal point for people to congregate around. It often covers tombs, prayer halls, and reception squares. The minarets are tall towers that lie close to the mosque's edge and are a dual-purpose figure. They stand as landmarks and are used to call out to the city for daily prayer. Prayer niches are a structure in the wall which signifies direction of Mecca. This is a convex structure that's laid in the wall. The minbar is a platform that gives the imam the ability to preside over prayers occurring in and around the mihrab, or prayer niche. This mosque is still an architectural marvel today and deserves to be known for centuries to come.
Hagia Sophia stands as one of the greatest monuments of the Byzantine and Ottoman empires. Two very talented craftsmen directed the design and construction of the church, unlike any church that had been built before, and it still remains the greatest example of the Byzantine architectural style. It's noted for its incredible arches, domes, and colonnades, adorned with gold, bronze, mosaics, and marble. The most striking feature, though, is its massive dome, held up by four large arches, with more than 100 feet in diameter and a height of 160 feet. Other domes were also added all throughout the structure, and all these domes had a huge impact on later Byzantine, Muslim, and Western European architecture. The intricate mosaics were created from glass, gold, and jewels and established a new style for the Byzantine adornment. Unlike Gothic and Renaissance architecture, the church did not display their imagery through glass but through mosaics, but both styles conveyed their religion through the mosaics of glass throughout the churches. It was the primary church for Constantinople for 1,000 years, but when the Islamic forces conquered the city, they rededicated the church as a mosque, calling it Hagia Sophia Kami, or Hagia Sophia Mosque. Many of the iconic mosaics were plastered over so not as to offend the Muslims who believed that depictions of humans, the prophets were blasphemous. In the next century, 3 more minarets were added in a new style for Muslim places of worship based on the Hagia Sophia evolved. Over time, the Istanbul skyline was filled with the silhouettes of domes and minarets. The Ottoman sultans adorned the mosque and did everything in their power to maintain its glory. Till this day, Hagia Sophia is the greatest example of Byzantine and Ottoman architecture under one dome.
All these styles of architecture are both similar and different in many ways. All places were specific buildings of worship, whilst for different religions. Every style had some sort of adornments to portray the stories of their religion, such as Gothic architecture using stained glass windows, while mosques used mosaic tiles. Architecturally, the buildings were very different as well, as Gothic was built to be thinner and higher, while the Roman style was built to be bulkier and wider. However, with all the buildings, they were made to be the centerpiece of the city, drawing in people from all across the world to gaze at their architectural wonder.